Halliburton's got the ball. Halliburton rises up. And then the whistle. Oh, my goodness. Tyrese Halliburton hits a three and is fouled.
You have got to be kidding me.
McConnell underneath the basket. Looking. Toppin in the corner for three.
Oh, yeah! Yeah! OB!
Pacers have it, a chance to tie.
Yeah, Nembhard
Hits the three. Nembhard gives Indiana the lead.
Hello and welcome back to the Pacers Fever Show. I am your host, Logan, and this is your go-to podcast for everything Indiana Pacers during this electric playoff run. Today, we're diving into a massive Game 2 showdown between the Indiana Pacers and the Cleveland Cavaliers coming up on Tuesday, May 6th. You might be listening to this on Monday night, as I will drop it a little bit later on in the evening, so that way you can listen to it tonight or tomorrow during your commute to work or as you're pre-gaming for that matchup that happens on Tuesday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. And Indiana took care of business in Game 1, snatching a critical win on the road and now have a golden opportunity to take a commanding 2-0 series lead. A win Tuesday night would give the Pacers full control of the second round battle and send the series back to Indy with all of the momentum and with the home crowd ready to explode. That is exactly what the Pacers will look to do in Game 2. But again, don't count out Cleveland just yet. The pressure is sky high for the Cavs, who have the number 1 seed and locked up home court throughout the playoffs. Indy steals that in Game 1, and they cannot afford to drop a second straight game on their home floor. Their backs are up against the wall right now, and you can bet they'll come out swinging tomorrow in the game. We'll break down the key matchups, what the Pacers need to do to stay hot, and how Cleveland might try to fight these Pacers figuratively and put up a good fight and claw back into this series. You don't want to miss this preview, so let's get it going. That Game 2 preview starts now. Number 1 seed Cleveland Cavaliers versus the number 4 seed Indiana Pacers. Game 2 is going to be tomorrow, or today if you're listening to this on Tuesday, at 7 p.m. Eastern Time on TNT. Game 3, Cavaliers at Pacers, will be on Friday, May 9th, and that's going to be at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time on ESPN. Game 4, Cavs at Pacers, Sunday, May 11th, 8 p.m. Eastern Time on TNT. And then Game 5, if necessary, Pacers will go back to Cleveland Tuesday, May 13th, time to be determined on TNT. Game 6, Cavs at Pacers, if necessary, Thursday, May 15th, time to be determined, will be on ESPN. And then Game 7 would be Pacers at Cavs on Sunday, May 18th, to be determined for both the time and the network. So let's talk about it. Let's get into that Game 2 preview. Indiana up 1-0 on Cleveland, and a big game loss on Sunday evening against the Pacers, as Cleveland was looking to impose their will on the Pacers on their home floor, and it just did not get off to a good start. About 30 minutes before the game, we knew that Darius Garland would be missing Game 1, as he had already missed Game 3 and 4 against the Miami Heat. And then he misses Game 1 on a report from NBA TV, and the concern for that injury is significant. So we're recording this on Monday evening. We haven't really heard any bit about the status of Darius Garland, as they will be going through a practice or did go through a practice earlier today. And then I think it'll be a game time decision come Tuesday. It'll just depend on how Darius Garland recovers from either going through walkthroughs or through warmups. I really just think with this injury, we're not going to know too much the day before a game or leading up to the game. I think this toe is seriously a game time decision. Each game might be different with this toe injury. We just don't know the severity or the significance as far as how long it lasts for this series. We know it's very serious. We know it's something that the Cavs are constantly monitoring. And we know it's an injury that can truly impact this series, as we saw in Game 1, with Donovan Mitchell being really the only ball handler that could make the plays happen that they needed to make in order for Cleveland to come close to even beating the Pacers in game one. And they didn't have that secondary ball handler that most teams will need in the playoffs. They didn't have somebody that could create opportunities for that offense, and it's a high octane offense. So they need somebody that's going to be able to run the point, take a little bit of pressure off Donovan Mitchell. And you could see towards the end of the third quarter or even into the beginning of the fourth quarter, Donovan Mitchell didn't have the gas that he really needed, I think, to step on the pedal and get up over that hump of the 40-point mark. And, I think part of the 3-point shooting struggles were the legs and just having to defend as much as possible on some of the better guards on Indiana. And again, I think it just caught up to Donovan Mitchell. And you saw the impact of not having Darius Garland get, kickstarting your offense. I mean, if any team goes down their point guard, that's a very difficult thing to manage and to withstand. I would say that's probably the most important aspect of the team is the point guard. He is the floor general. He is the one that gets you going. And if you don't have a ball dominant forward who plays a lot of point guard type minutes, like a Giannis or a LeBron, I could see where having, a team having to rely heavily on a point guard that is a very good point guard. If that person were to miss a game, that is going to have a huge impact on not only that game, but the series and however long that injury is lasting for. And so, talking about game one, a lot of the difference was one, the ability of Cleveland to be able to get out and get into their own offense and slowing the Pacers down. The Cavs are okay with this faster pace, way more so than the Bucks were, but the Pacers were playing at a level of intensity and speed that I'm not sure the Cavs were as comfortable with. I think the Cavs do play fast, but I think when you put the Pacers in a series like this, who where the game plan can be to focus on weaknesses of a team, to digest a game plan and focus on one team for a couple of weeks, you start to get into a lot of weaknesses, a lot of underlying stats, data, and you can really game plan. You've got, days in between some of these games. And I think the Pacers benefit from having breaks in between more so than the Cavs. The Cavs are a little bit more experienced as far as the age of their players. They are not as experienced in a playoff atmosphere as the Pacers are, because this Pacers core is the one that went to the Eastern Conference Finals last year. So it's a very interesting mix. I was listening to Brian Windhorst on his show and Tim Legler as well throughout the day and on my way to work today. And I was really interested to hear what their thoughts were. And they think of this as the most intriguing matchup just because on paper, there are a lot of similarities. But when you look at how these teams play, they're very different stylistically, even though they're both fast paced, high octane offenses that can defend in a top 10 type of defense in the NBA kind of way. So, again, there's a lot of intrigue here. I think the Pacers put the league and the world on notice by beating the Cavs in game one. I think coming into this series, if you listen to most podcasts or you read most articles, the Pacers were not being picked. In fact, I think the one that the ESPN folks released, there were 12 analysts that were making their predictions, and it was like a 12-0 sweep Cavs, and the average was like Cavs in 5, Cavs in 6. And while that can still happen, maybe less so the Cavs in 5, but Cavs in 6 is still manageable for Cleveland. I still feel like a lot of people underestimated the Pacers, and I think the Cavaliers underestimated the Pacers. There's a lot of talk before this series, and if they talk to Donovan Mitchell or they've talked to Darius Garland, they talked to Jared Allen and even Kenny Atkinson, and you ask them about this Pacer team, they will tell you that the Pacers are a talented team. But if you listen to what Ty Jerome and Mitchell and Atkinson say, and even the national media, coaches around the league, and people that have watched the game, they still thought the Cavs had an advantage. I don't think that anyone gave the Pacers a chance aside from Pacer fans and people around the organization and Celtics fans, maybe, because the Celtics fans, I feel like the Celtics and the Celtics fans understand how talented this Indiana team is, because while getting swept 4-0 last year, I do feel like the Celtics' hardest series last year was the Pacers. I feel like they were in the game all the way up until the end of the fourth quarter in all of those games. And I think there was a true respect for this up and coming team like the Pacers. I think last year, and maybe that's what it has to do with this year, is why so many people are underselling what the Pacers have done and have accomplished over their last couple of years, is the fact that they did run into a injured Bucks and Knicks team, and then once again ran into an injured Bucks team, and now Darius Garland isn't playing, and the Pacers have taken advantage of that. But really, I mean, you can only play the teams that are in front of you. And it wasn't like they went into Boston and got absolutely handed 4 losses, and it shows just how uncompetitive they were in that series. They were competitive, I would say, a majority of that series, if not right down to the last minute of most of those games. The Pacers were in it. So this idea that the Pacers haven't earned where they are or who they are, the respect that they should be given, I think it's due in part to the fact that one, they don't respect the idea that the Pacers have beaten good teams to get to where they are. They've also, you know, I think everybody would say that the Pacers wouldn't have advanced in these playoff series had so and so been healthy, this person been healthy. The Pacers are also young, and we're a mid-market team. I mean, there's not a lot of people. We don't get a whole lot of national attention as is. And when the playoffs pick up, they just picture this. You haven't been watching a team all season. Now you're going back and watching highlights, reading articles, trying your best to cover a team that you've never actually watched, 2 or 3 games, full 2 or 3 games, and understand their scheme. I mean, I'm a Pacer fan through and through. We watch 82 games plus a season, and there's still times where I'm trying to understand, okay, what were the Pacers thinking there? Like that's a little off what they normally are thinking in that situation. There's still moments I have like that. So picture a person who's covering 30 some teams and they're having to talk about all of those teams, and then it breaks down into 16 teams. They're still not watching the Pacers. They're picking, the Nuggets and Clippers game to watch, or the Rockets and Golden State. Just listen to the national media, listen to their podcast. The Pacers usually get, even in the series like this, like today, I was listening to podcasts and the Pacers only had about 8 to 10 minutes of coverage. They talked about the Golden State and Houston Rockets game 7 game for 35 minutes. And that's no fault of theirs. And that's going to get more listens because it was a great game. And then the Golden State Warriors have a massive following, and Houston's a much bigger city than Indianapolis. And so I don't blame the national media, but I will say I don't like when national media comes out and to solidify their argument or confirm or affirm what their beliefs are, they try to tell you that the Pacers aren't deserving of being in these situations when we as Pacers fans know that they are 100% deserving of this, and very seldom do they embarrass themselves against good teams. And I'm talking about the fact that this team performs even better against great teams. And a Cavs team that is number 1 seed in the Eastern Conference is a great team. So again, I think we're always going to be the underdog, I think, in these situations, which I honestly prefer because the Pacers prefer it. It gives them a chip. It's still going to give them a chip. They're going to have one if they get to the next round. They're going to have one if they get to the finals. It's just how it's going to be. The Pacers are always going to be the underdog until they take that number 1 seed away from somebody. And even then, if they're running up against a number 2 seed like Boston, you would still have that argument that the Pacers aren't quite as good as said big market team, just because it doesn't get the clicks that you would normally get. And I get it. It's engagement from social media, it's engagement from tuning into these podcasts and these TV shows. The Pacers don't have a big fan base. Indianapolis is not a bigger city than a lot of those big market teams that we're going to be talking about over the next couple of weeks. So it's just not interesting. It's not sexy enough for sports media to cover the Pacers. And that's okay, because hopefully a podcast like mine will give at least somewhat of an objective view, hopefully a completely objective view. I try to be as objective as possible. And, I find myself and even like a show like this, like a series preview or a game preview, I'm trying to be unbiased as possible, trying to think about okay, here's what the Cavs would be doing in a game 2. Here's what the Pacers would need to be worried about. Should I be worried about the Pacers? Because the Cavs are, I mean, seriously, the Cavs are in a really tough spot right now. They've got to win game 2. It's, we don't ever like to get into must wins, but honestly, I think this is a must win for the Cavs, this game 2. And so let's get into it. We won't talk too much more about the media ignoring us, because that's just the way it's going to be. And honestly, it's going to have to be that way up until we don't exist. So that's life, baby. That's life. Game 2, quick game 1 recap. What stood out? So if you're following along on the YouTube channel, you can see our rundown on the right-hand side. We'll talk game 1 recap. We'll talk a little bit more about Darius Garland, because there's a little bit more I want to say about that injury and what that means for the Cavs going forward. We'll talk adjustments for the Cavs and the Pacers, keys to the game for the Indiana Pacers to grab game 2. And then we'll talk about 5 predictions that I have for game 2 of this 7-game series. Best of 7 series. It's not a guaranteed we'll get to 7. Hopefully we don't get to 7, because that means the Pacers probably took care of business. So, or the Cavs, the Cavs flipped on a switch and blew the Pacers right out. So game 2, game 2 to lead into game 2. We're gonna have to talk about game 1 some again. And if you caught my recap episode, you probably know what we're going to talk a little bit about. But I do kind of want to go over some different things that I felt were important in game 1 that I think really set up this series. And that's definitely going to be the 4 and 5 matchup. The 4 and 5 matchup appears to be the most important thing in this series, with Jarrett Allen and Evan Mobley versus Pascal Siakam and Miles Turner. And again, listening to other people's shows and trying to get an understanding of what they were thinking, and then putting those together with my thoughts, similar kind of thoughts we had today with like Legler and Brian Windhorst and his show, and then Jalen Rose and them over on NBA. Just listening to those, I was thinking about, what did the Cavs struggle with in game 1? And it truly was that mismatch. And I think the Pacers just present a nightmare of a matchup at the 4 and 5 position. Evan Mobley is a very good player, a very talented defender, but I think a lot of his effectiveness and what makes him effective can be taken away somewhat from what the Pacers do, especially on the defensive end for the Cavs. I think that Evan Mobley is a great defender in keeping guys out of the paint. I believe that the Pacers present a challenge in the fact that they will force Jarrett Allen and Evan Mobley, depending on who they're guarding. And at times they did switch yesterday, where there were, I mean, a lot of the defensive assignment for Evan Mobley was going to be Pascal Siakam. But there were times where Pascal had Jarrett Allen defending him, and there were times where Miles Turner had Evan Mobley defending him. And I think they switched everything yesterday, and I think they'll continue to switch. I'm not really sure. I mean, that might be the one adjustment that they make defensively, as far as what can they do to get better, is just not allow Jarrett Allen and Evan Mobley to get on these guards, because the Pacer guards absolutely handled business against the big guys. But it's still, I mean, you could still run actions if you're Rick Carlisle. Maybe we're getting too far into like the adjustments, and we'll leave this for later. But this matchup is just not good for the Cavs in many ways. And I think you saw that in game 1, right? And I don't want to diminish anything that the Cavs are defensively, because they're a pretty good defensive unit. But I do think that there are a lot of strengths that the Pacers have that expose the defensive liabilities that the Cavs have, or they're just not as solid against the Pacers. While still good, they're just not as good as they would be against some of these other teams. And that is 100% due in the fact that Miles Turner and Pascal Siakam are going to bury threes. And you have to be concerned about that as a Cavalier fan, because Jarrett Allen, it cannot guard a perimeter shooter, and he cannot guard a Pascal Siakam or even a Miles Turner who can take off towards the basket on the dribble, but also sets you up with a nightmare when he does, especially Miles Turner, when there is a pick and roll, right? Or as the Pacers were doing in game 1, a lot of double screens, a lot of off-ball actions, a lot of dump downs by the Cavs and trying to drop into those spaces. But when they would drop, the Pacers caused all sorts of havoc because their ability to shoot the 3-point shot and get open and move the basketball. I mean, the Cavs are picking their poisons, and I think that's what the Pacers' strength is they have so many poisons they can distribute. They have so many punches that they can throw from different directions. It's hard to game plan against this team because if I'm saying, let's take Tyrese out of the game, well, Andrew Nembhard is just as good when he has the ability to create and be a second ball handler. Let's take Pascal Siakam out of the game. Well, if we do that, we have to worry about Miles Turner and Tyrese Halliburton with the pick and roll and those double screens coming, and you lose sight of Tyrese or Miles, or lose sight of Nembhard coming off a screen from Turner or Pascal. So Pascal's not really somebody that you can really lock up because he flows and ebbs and flows with the offense. He kind of goes into spaces and floats into spaces where he's going to find mismatch. And a mismatch he has is against Evan Mobley, who's a great defender, but struggles tremendously against Pascal Siakam. And Siakam's always done well against the Cavs. And I've got some numbers that we'll talk about here because I didn't realize this, but they were talking about how Pascal Siakam, there was an allusion to it yesterday in the broadcast, but then I went digging. So I went to StatMuse, and over the last 10 games, Pascal Siakam against the Cavaliers with Evan Mobley and with a version of Jared Allen when healthy, Pascal Siakam averages 21.1 points per game against the Cavs, 7.8 rebounds, and 3.6 assists. That's in his last 10 games against these Cavs. So he's done very well against the big men in Cleveland. Now you look at Evan Mobley and his career against Pascal Siakam, because that's the assignment that Pascal is getting, and even at times Miles Turner. But Evan Mobley against Pascal Siakam has only averaged 15 points a game, 15.3, and 10.7 rebounds and 1.9 assists. So he's not creating anything out of the post, which you want your post players to be able to create something. Pascal Siakam, 2, almost 3 assists better than Evan Mobley at times. And I think therein lies some of the issues that the Cavs are going to have all series, because against Dean Wade, I think they said in the last 2 or 1 or 2 matchups, and against Dean Wade, Pascal's like 11 for 13 anytime that he's defended by Dean Wade. And so that's not an answer. Isaac Okoro's not big enough for Pascal. So that's a difficult matchup. So there's not really anywhere to turn defensively. Like maybe you try DeAndre Hunter there, but then you lose that ability to guard a wing player with DeAndre Hunter. And although DeAndre Hunter is lengthier and is 6'8" and is bigger for a forward, like a smaller forward or a guard, a 2 or 3, he's not good enough to guard Pascal. So, and you saw this multiple times. You go back and watch some of the film. There are so many issues when there are screens and off-ball actions that Pascal is making. Even when Pascal was posting up, there were times where he post up in a zone, or he would post up the man guarding him, and they would try to kind of shade over and maybe double team him, or at least show towards him to try to get the ball out of his hands. And he would just create so much because there was just no communication. There was no understanding of who was guarding who and what their assignments were. Jared Allen lost Miles Turner a ton. Jared Allen got stuck up in the pick and roll with Miles Turner and Tyrese late in the game. So the good thing about this Pacer team is they just cause so many problems on the offensive end, especially the starting unit. It almost, and I say this with a grain of salt just because, game 2, they might come back and prove me wrong on this, but history shows against this Cavs team that this matchup is a difficult one because of the ability of the Pacers bigs to spread the floor and the inability of the Cavs bigs to really defend a perimeter. So again, you take Mobley out of the paint, it's easier for the Pacers to get in the paint and score. Well, Mobley kind of sucked back into the paint, and that allows Pascal and Miles just to kind of roam free and set these screens. And there's not any pressure coming from Mobley. If you go back to and look at game 1, you see a lot of Mobley at least shading over and covering that space and enough time to kind of show and then get that defender who had just gotten picked back to that guard. But there were a lot of times where Mobley was just kind of showing and then getting off that pick like, well, I can't go out there and defend that because they're just going to blow by me. So let me just step out, try to get this defender to go out towards the half court line, or at least try to get him off the screen and not as quick into a pick and roll. And Mobley had a hard time with that. Yeah, I just feel like he doesn't defend well enough to where he can switch on a screen and defend a guard for a longer period of time, and neither can Jared Allen. So that defender has to fight through that pick, get under that pick. But if you get under it, the Pacers are going to shoot it. What do you do? I mean, it becomes a talking point of, can these two be on the floor that much together and for us to still be effective? Because when the two of them were together with that starting rotation that included Sam Merrill, it was one of the worst lineups. I think it was the worst lineup that both teams put out there. So that's not good as a Cavs fan or a Cavs player or anybody in the Cavs organization. That's not good. If your rooting interest is in Cleveland, I mean, the Pacers are getting what they want on offense. And I would say it does have a similar feel to the way that the Bucks tried to also defend the Pacers. They don't really have a lockdown defender. So you get into this, switching of players and man onto another man. And when you're switching these assignments, eventually they're going to run you around. So they're going to wear you down. Two, when there's so many actions happening in an offense, it is so difficult to keep up with that, with guys driving and then cutting and then going off of picks. And then on the off ball, they're getting picks, and, they're setting back screens and you're getting backdoored. And it just, you start to get, your head starts to go on a swivel, and it's dizzying for defenses, what the Pacers can do. And that's what made those Spurs back in the day so good, was there was just too much movement. It was hard for defenses to understand where they were supposed to be. And in a 24-second span, in the shot clock span, you were eventually just going to lose them because there's just too much movement. And that's what the Pacers have. And the thing that helps them is the Pacers are so deep. They're running 11, 10-man rotations. It's nonstop. And with the pace in which they play, that also speeds things up. So I can only imagine what it's like to try to defend this Pacers team, because it's just constantly moving and it's constantly having your head on a swivel, but then so much so that you start to get dizzy, because it's like, who am I guarding? I don't know who I'm guarding. There's too many picks. There's too many cuts. There's back screens. There's people driving. There's people pick and rolling. There's people fading off those picks. Where do I go? And so it's a good problem to have if you're the Pacers. And it's funny, because when the Pacers do get into these struggles, it's because they stop doing that. Like, and I don't know if it's because they do get worn out, or you start to see that the defense is starting to catch on a little bit and guys get tired. And of course it's going to happen throughout the game, where you're going to go through these runs where you're playing and firing on all cylinders and playing well, but then there's a 4 to 5 minute stretch that you might not play as well. And that usually happens to every single team in a basketball game. It's usually, because they're tired, or the lineup in is just not as crisp and polished as the others. But for the most part, I mean, this Pacer team for 40 minutes just runs you right into the ground. And that's so difficult to try to defend. And the Cavs found that out in game one. They found out just how difficult this team is when all of the pieces are there, because in the regular season, this version of the Cavs and this version of the Pacers never saw each other. It was 4 games of just chaos in the season, with the last 2 games really being games that the Cavs didn't care about. And in the first 2 games, Aaron Nesmith and Tyrese Halliburton really don't make an impact on those games. And Nesmith's out with injuries. Cavs also in Cleveland, I think it was in Cleveland, where Tyrese gets hurt and comes out during the game. And the Pacers actually ended up winning that game. But still, I mean, this offense looks completely different with Tyrese Halliburton and Aaron Nesmith, especially because Aaron Nesmith is playing as the number 2 option right now. But, I mean, Andrew Dimhard will make a case for himself for the number 2 from yesterday. So this was incredible. I mean, just a lot of fun to watch. A great basketball game. And the Pacers, the immaturity I thought that they had last year, I think they're starting to prove that with more experience, with more time, they are now the team that understands much better how to close out games. And I think you saw that in game one, because in the third quarter, late in the third quarter, the Cavs really start to make their push. They get a 4-point lead. It's not until Benedict Mathurin hits a three. There's a big block in the fourth. And that's when you start to see this kind of flip on its head. And then the Pacers regain control in the fourth after back and forth and back and forth, and then absolutely just stepped on their necks and close out the game on a 20-10 advantage. And that's all she wrote from 102 to 101, about just under midway through the fourth. Pacers just blow the doors off of the Cavs and send them to a game one loss on their home floor. And huge games from Tyrese Halliburton, who had 22 points, 13 assists. He had 3 blocks and 1 turnover, 3 boards. He was probably the best he's ever been in a Pacer uniform. I'd say that was the most complete game he's ever played. And, I think people look at the points total and go, really? You think so? And there was that stretch where he was just insane right before the play-in tournament and on through that season before he gets the hamstring injury last year. But yeah, I just feel like defensively he answered their challenge. Like, he talked about this, and I think it was Weiner who was the one that I saw talking to him on the bench, and Lloyd Pierce will do this too, where they challenge Ty defensively. And I thought for the first time after he said that, he really felt like he rose to that challenge and decided that he was going to lock down defensively. Had 2 big blocks and huge defensive possessions where he caused Donovan Mitchell all sorts of problems. And again, off of those big defensive plays, the Pacers score. So that momentum, that defense leads to offense, which isn't typical for the Pacers as much. A lot of their offense leads to good defense, where it's such an advantage when defense can lead to good offense. And I feel like Tyrese really was able to do that in game one. And I think that intensity, that hunger to defend like that, it's going to carry over, because he's gotten better as time has gone on. He's become a better defender. And as he's getting stronger, as he's understanding where strength might not be something that he can lean on, his smarts are where he kind of, he's pickpocketed somebody. He's gotten to passing lanes. He's read the defense well enough to where he can help and support his other teammates in their defensive assignments. He's gotten a lot better at that. He helped with Giannis in the last series. He's grown so much defensively, and obviously his offensive game is always going to speak for itself. But to have just 1 turnover and the ability for him to create as much as he did was unbelievable. 8 3-pointers were assisted by his. I think it was like 34 plus points or something like that, 38 points that were off of his assist. So he is the engine that makes this team go, but he's also got a lot of help around him, and guys like Andrew Nembhard, who went to a whole different level yesterday, scored 23 points. He had 5 3-pointers on 6 attempted. He was a below 30% 3-point shooter in the regular season. The guy's just got a different intensity in the playoffs, and it's great to see. And I would say the same thing about Aaron Nesmith, who went 4 of 6, shot 66%, and he had 17 points. But his defensive tenacity, even though he got into foul trouble, was something that changed the game too. Played only 24 minutes yesterday. Would have done more had he gotten more minutes, but the foul trouble really got to him. But then where he was, kind of where he had to come out, Benedict Mathurin played a really important role when Nesmith got in foul trouble in the third quarter, had to come out. Mathurin stepped right in the third and fourth and played in that rotation that he was used to playing in, because he was starting when Aaron Nesmith was down until January with that ankle injury. Mathurin stepped right in, and he played pretty well. 11 points. He had a massive block. I thought he was good defensively, which that's another thing that you've seen a lot of growth this season from Ben on the defensive end. So he wasn't getting beat as bad, and he played 23 minutes, which is the most minutes I think he's played in the postseason so far. Might have been game one in the Bucks, but I can't remember exactly how many minutes. But his minutes had been dwindling. And then in this series, he's a big X factor in what they can do off the bench. So Pacers look great in game one. Nembhard and Neesmith, I mean, the unspoken heroes of game one, alongside with Tyrese, just complete game changers. And that's what really stood out to me. Heading into game two, what will the Cavs do? What adjustments need to be made? Well, one adjustment is to add Darius Garland back into the mix. We're going to talk a little bit about Darius here because we've already talked about the injury. I'm going to talk about more about his impact that he can have because he's such a high engine, high motor, great offensive weapon. He's not good defensively. So I think Sam Merrill is actually a better defensive minded player presence in that starting lineup, but they truly miss Darius Garland's playmaking ability. I mean, Donovan Mitchell can make plays because of the attention he gets, but Darius Garland is more of that true point guard who isn't necessarily getting all the attention. Of course, he's going to get attention because he is an all-star level player, but I would say that Darius Garland is more about how do I get my teammates involved, very similar to what Tyrese Halliburton is. I'd say a more mature version of Tyrese. Tyrese is, I think, more special, but I believe that Darius Garland is what the Cavs really need, and any team that's going to be competitive need that guy that's going to make the plays. And Darius is that. He is intense on the offensive end. He's not good defensively, but I think can make up for it with some of the help that he has in behind him with Mobley and Allen. But yeah, you saw it at times. This offense kind of got stuck in mud. When the three-pointers aren't going, the Cavs team can be a tough watch. And that's the way with a lot of these shoot 40-plus three-pointers a game teams. When you live and die by the three-pointer, and I talked about this in the last episode, when you live and die by the three, it's just, I mean, it's a hit or miss whether you're going to win a game. And I think if I'm a Cavs fan, I think that's my biggest concern is while this team is a very good three-point shooting team, there has been a regression to the mean over the last couple of months. And when you're cruising through the last section of a season, I do think that the focus and intentionality of an offense can kind of get lost. And in the regular season, their three-point shooting was just carrying them at times where there's just, besides Donovan Mitchell, and especially when Garland's out, there's just not a lot of layers to this offense. And I think that's what makes them a little bit more manageable than a team like Boston. Because I do feel like Boston, while they do shoot a lot of threes, have the ability with Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum to get into the interior and in the paint and cause issues. So they have other options where I do feel like Darius Garland isn't a player that's going to necessarily get easy finishes around the rim just because he's a smaller guard. But Donovan Mitchell, I mean, he crashes the rim, especially when he doesn't get shots going. It was interesting. They were talking about Donovan Mitchell and what his performance reminded them of last year, and they said it was more reminiscent of what he used to do with the Jazz more so than what does with the Cavs. Because once the Jazz started to regress and Mitchell became more of a focal point of the offense, he would shoot high volumes of three-point shots. And while a good three-point shooter, he's not great from behind the arc. So, take that for what it is if you're a Pacers fan, but also there's some concern about this if you're a Pacers fan is the fact that they were awful from behind the arc. I mean, this team was abysmal. I don't think they've shot. I think they said if this had been the regular season, this would have been one or two of the worst Cavs shooting performances that whole season. They shot 9 of 38 from three, 23%, and 45 of 98 from the field at 45%. They had 15 more shots than the Pacers and still got beat by 9. They had 8 turnovers compared to the 17 turnovers by the Pacers, and they still lost by 9. So while Cavs fans, I think, are taking a lot of silver lining from this where, okay, we didn't have Garland. okay, we didn't have a good performance from anybody outside of Donovan, really, and maybe Ty Jerome. Okay, you know, we're going to hit more threes. We're going to be more around that 38 to 40% 3-point shooting team who hits 20 some threes. I still would have concerns if I'm a Cavs fan, and I'm trying to say this with the most uh, neutral feeling I can. The Pacers turned it over 17 times. They don't do that usually. It's not even usually that close. It's usually around a bad game for this Pacer team is 10 turnovers. There's times where they don't even turn it over in the double digits, 6, 7, 8 times a game. So that's 9 possessions. And luckily for the Pacers in this game one, there were a lot of dead ball turnovers, not a lot of live ball turnovers. So it didn't hurt them as much. But the Cavs still capitalized on their turnovers. And the Pacers aren't going to do that again. While Cavs fans can say that the Cavs aren't going to shoot like that again, that they're going to get help eventually from Darius Garland, while Strus is going to hit more shots, Merrill's going to hit more shots, Hunter's going to hit more shots. They're going to get better performance from the bench. The Pacers are still going to get better in the turnover battle. I think they'll be better defensively. I think the Pacers will also have an intensity in the rebounding game. I think they're going to make that a focus. If as we get into the Pacers adjustments, I don't want to give too much away. But the Cavs adjustments are literally getting a player back that's hurt, making more 3-point shots, and figuring out, I guess, defensively what those assignments look like and what lineups work. If I'm Kenny Atkinson, I would be hard pressed not to look at possibly not having Jarrett Allen and Mobley out there a whole lot together. Maybe you can start the game like that, to kind of set the tone. But the way that the bigs for the Pacers have exposed those bigs and the guards being able to play off those bigs, if I'm a Cavs fan, I'd be a little bit concerned about that. With the Pacers, you could kind of be concerned about the flip opposite, where the bigs did control the offensive boards. The bigs did create issues in the paint. The bigs did score, or the bigs and plus guards that got in the paint outscored you 70-38 in the paint, which is a big deficit. And not many teams win ball games with that big of a deficit in the paint. But the Pacers team did. And it's because they hit those mid-range shots. They hit a lot of mid-range shots. They hit a lot of three-pointers. They didn't really need to get into the paint because they were shooting the ball so well from the outside and just outside the paint. So, I don't put too much stock into that in game one because of how good the Pacers were and effective they are usually anyway, shooting the basketball. The Pacers are a 48 to 50% shooting team. I'm not shocked when they have these crazy 50% plus 50% 3-point performances, because they just do shoot that, because they're always so open. Tyrese Halliburton gets people so open, and the way they move the ball can get guys open. So it doesn't always shock me when they have these crazy games where they just hit everything, because they have that ability. We've seen that ability in multiple facets and multiple games throughout the season. So whenever people act surprised, I'm really not as shocked. Like, yeah, that's an incredible performance. And yeah, do they duplicate it again? Probably not. But can they come close to that? Yeah, absolutely. I've seen this team do that multiple times. It's not shocking anymore. I mean, this is a team that scored their franchise high 160 something points, I think it was, against the Washington Wizards this year. This team has an ability. Their true shooting percentage is just incredible. So again, the Cavs have a lot of things that they've got to fix. I do feel like their defensive intensity just wasn't there. I mean, for the first half, it just felt like the Pacers could do anything they wanted on the offensive end. So that's a big adjustment. I mean, you're talking about the thing that they might have to say is just like, we're not switching anymore. We're not switching assignments. You fight through picks. But, I mean, that just wears a team out if there's so many picks and they're trying to fight through everything, and you're going to have instances where guys just get loose. So, yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think of, and we've seen it in one game, and we didn't really have a good chance to watch a ton of Cavs games this year. But from everything I saw yesterday, the Pacers were ready for everything the Cavs could try to throw at them, where the Cavs weren't ready for most of what the Pacers threw at them. So kudos to Rick Carlisle. He's very good at this, especially. He's great at adjustments. He's great at halftime adjustments. He's really good when he has the ability to prepare. Like when this team has an ability to prepare, Rick Carlisle I'd put up there and maybe the top coach in the league, top 2, top 3 of just his ability to prepare for things. I mean, this team is, even when they're not playing well, this team is always prepared, it seems. Or if they're not prepared for that game, they quickly fix it. So I'm very happy with the way the Pacers came out in game 1. Obviously, that third quarter was scary, but I think you had to go through that. You had to see what this team, you had to see what they're made of, and I think they saw it. I think they got to experience their growth firsthand, live and in person, as it was happening. The Pacers got to experience what their growth looked like, and that was cool to watch. I mean, straight up and down the roster, you got to see what growth looked like, and that was pretty cool. Pacers adjustments. What do they need to do? Obviously, the team that wins doesn't make as many adjustments because what works don't fix it. But I would say there were a lot to take away from this game because we didn't have a lot of games against the Cavs where, I mean, we didn't have really any games this year to really see what the Cavs were made of. Now that we have seen what the Cavs are made of, minus Darius Garland, but we know what Darius Garland offers because he's the one we've seen. I feel that the Pacers do have some things that they can take away from this. Hold on to the basketball. These stupid off-ball fouls, I mean, they cost you at least 7 good possessions, or look like what was going to be 7 good possessions, or 6 or 7. I mean, just some really stupid fouls or dead ball turnovers. Just that could have been avoided. I mean, this could have been a 10 turnover game, which is not great, but better than 17. I mean, 17 is like, I remember that was like what Oladipo and them's teams were, and you lived with it and tried to win. Now, though, I mean, we just gotten so used to, and I think are spoiled by the fact that Tyrese doesn't turn the ball over. Pascal doesn't usually turn the ball over. Neesmith and Nembhard are very good about keeping the basketball. You get spoiled. And so I think that's one adjustment is you cannot give the Cavs the basketball that much. Wow. So I just saw this on X. I hadn't seen this earlier in the day. Cavs coach Kenny Atkinson has said that he has real concern about DeAndre Hunter and Evan Mobley's availability tomorrow against the Pacers. So that came out earlier this afternoon. I didn't see that. I guess I haven't been on X since I've gotten home, but yeah, I guess that was around 3 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 2 o'clock. Yeah, 2 o'clock. Jeez. Well, that changes a lot. And it doesn't even mention Darius Garland. Really? So DeAndre Hunter, I guess, dislocated his shooting thumb, and Evan Mobley had an ankle. And I don't remember I remember the Hunter one. The Hunter one. Well, there was one where like Neesmith, I think it was Neesmith. They got tangled up and they went down, and it looked like it jarred his shoulder. And he grabbed his shoulder. I thought he dislocated his shoulder. But then there was another play. I saw him go underneath the basket and he hit his hand on, or I think it was the Mathurin block actually. But he came up and he like was grabbing his hand, and it was like that oh shoot moment where he kind of wandered over by the trainers, like like that's not good. Yikes! So that's massive news, and I didn't see it at all today. So that helps. See, that's what happens when you're working and you don't look up things right before. I usually do that, but yeah, both of them are listed as questionable with real concern, says Kenny Atkinson. Oh man. Again, these storylines are going to continue around these Pacers that, they never play anybody healthy. Again, you can't control a lot of this. It's too bad. It really is. I hate seeing teams. I hope they both play. Hope Darius plays too, because it's just better beating these teams when they've got their guys. And you just don't want to wish injury on anybody. But anyway, back to my point. I just don't know what the Pacers do to really change what they did. I think obviously defensively they could be better, especially the bench or second unit. They've got to find a better matchup. I don't really know who's going to have the Ty Jerome defensive assignment because you can't play Andrew Nembhard 48 minutes to where he could guard Donovan Mitchell and Ty Jerome. And I think Ben Shepherd is fine. I guess you could do that. But I wouldn't rely too heavily on Shep. Maybe Jarris. But then again, he's playing a 4 usually in those lineups. So I don't know. What do you do, right? I don't know. But I think they've got to figure that out. I think that's the biggest advantage I think the Cavs have that didn't really exploit yesterday is DeAndre Hunter and Ty Jerome could be an absolute problem for the bench unit because they don't really have people that can defend them. So, yeah, I think that's where the Cavs will need big games from both of them to really make this Pacer team struggle. Yeah. Anything else from the Pacers? I'm trying to think if there's anything else that turn the ball over. Oh, offensive rebounds. Just stay even, right? Like we're not a good offensive rebounding team, and I don't expect this to ever be with this unit or with these players. But we can at least lose that battle by 1 or 2, not 7 or 4 or 8 or 10. Like we give them too many second chance opportunities, 8 to 10 points off a second chance. And this team even more so because they're dangerous from the 3-point line. I mean, those 5 to 4 offensive rebounds could even lead to 3 threes, 9 points. Like it can be disastrous if you allow them to have as many offensive boards as they had yesterday, 13 to 7. I mean, that's 6 extra offensive rebounds that they got. However, that being said, the Pacers did end even with the Cavs yesterday in the rebounding, or not yesterday. Yeah, yesterday in the rebounding battle. So that is definitely something that the Pacers will need to focus on is offensive boards because they got hammered there. But they did have 6 more defensive rebounds. That was because the Cavs missed a lot of shots yesterday. 43 and 43. You like that, right? You need to win the rebounding battle because I think every game they lost last in the postseason because they lost the rebound battle. Yeah, that's what the Pacers need to do. I don't think there's really anything else. I think you just keep going as you're going. You got to keep doing what you're doing. Keys to the game for the Pacers to win game 2. I've got 3 keys. Offensive rebounding and box out, right? You just like what I've talked about. You've got to get bodies on guys and you got to box them out. You cannot let them have second chance opportunities because second chance opportunities, especially at home, especially against a 3-point shooting crazy team, they're going to hit shots eventually. And that could be all the difference in the world in a game. Number 2, get Tyrese Halliburton started again early. Get him shots. Plan that offense to get him going towards the rack. He needs to be going towards the rack. He did do a couple of his it seems like it's always the 6-point lead too. It's like right on the cusp where the Pacers, if he hit the 3, they'd go up by 9 or 10. Like they would extend into it, or even at 4 points, they'd go to a 7-point lead, a good lead. It's always those threes that he doesn't usually hit. And it's wild because he is a clutch 3-point shooter. He hits them when they're close. He hits them when they're way up ahead. But for some reason, when they're in that, right at that, where if he hits this 3, that's a timeout. See you later. Call, this could be the game. He always struggles with those. And it's usually because he takes an ISO shot over a taller defender. So there's times where I want him to drive, and then there's other times where, he usually hits those shots. So it's very difficult. And I can imagine it's difficult for him where he's a very good 3-point shooter, but he's also very good at finishing around the rim, and he can get to the rim pretty easily. So it's like pick your fate kind of thing. If he buries the 3, then we're all happy, and I'm not complaining about it. But it just seems like lately he's had a couple of those where he's had the opportunity to really get the offense lit up, and he takes a 3, and it's like, that was kind of out of the flow, right? Like I don't like the out of flow And again, that's just because we're spoiled because of what he can do and because what they do on the offensive end sometimes to make it look so easy. There's just times where he takes contested 3-pointers, and I know you got to take contested 3-pointers when you're a good player and a good shooter like him. But there's just times like, ooh, I wonder what would have happened if he would have just gone to the rack, right? So we'll see. I mean, that's something that I think as time goes on, you start to figure out more and more what you're more effective in doing. He hits those threes, and I'm sitting here going, man, I love that he just does that and buries teams. But it's just because he's missed the last couple of ones that I can remember where he had a real chance to bury a team, and he shoots these threes, and you're like, oh, that's tough. But yeah, getting him started early and getting him to see a three go in would be huge. I mean, when he sees threes go in, that's when he really starts to he's really become very good at that right above the elbow, maybe a couple steps in from the 3-point line where he gets it's usually later in a shot clock too, where he faces up against someone and he does like a little spin or he'll do a shifty little handle or gather up into a jump shot and he hits it like at a very high clip. I mean, he hit some mid-rangers that I'm like, dang, like that's a really tough shot that he hit. So yeah, I'm a big fan of those twos that he's taken. He's done a lot of that lately, which I've loved to see that progression because then he becomes an absolute terror on offense because he can hit the floater, he can get to the rim, he can also bury those mid-range jump shots, and then he can also step out to three. And he can do a step back from those positions where he's hitting those twos to make them into those threes that he likes to hit. So yeah, I mean, it's funny because like that's the one critique I've ever had about Tyrese Halliburton. I don't have any other critiques besides that one. Is just that sometimes there are times where I'm like, oh, I wonder if he would have taken that to the rim, what would have happened? But that's just me getting greedy because of how good he is. I think that was 2. Key to the game number 3: keep playing at your pace. I don't think. The Cavs do play fast, but this is not the pace. They do not want to. I think they actually do not want to get into a run and gun game with the Pacers because I think it actually fits the Pacers. Like the Pacers, again, a 3-point shooting team needs their legs, but the speed in which the Pacers play can a lot of times wear teams down, and just the ball movement wears teams down. It really does wear your players out, and you need good legs to shoot threes consistently and hit them. So I think I mean, even if you got another tick of speed, go further, like go faster. I mean, it wears teams down. And then when again, the Cavs depth, they've got great depth in Ty Jerome and in DeAndre Hunter. Okoro's okay, but I would argue that the Pacers' depth is more experienced and better in the fact that like it's a steep drop off from Ty and DeAndre to the next bench players. Whereas I don't find it the case with the Pacers. I don't think there's a steep drop off from a guy like Obi Toppin and Ben to TJ to also Jarris to also Ben Shepherd. Those are very serviceable players. I mean, and then Thomas Bryant. Sorry, you had Thomas Bryant in there too. Like that's 11 solid players. Where I do think the Cavs, I would say that there's probably a little less faith in guys like Sam Merrill when he's off the bench and Isaac Okoro. They have good moments, but I feel like their moments are far and few between. Whereas the Pacers' depth, I feel like it's just a consistent player. Like they just consistent. Ben Shepherd, if he's starting to hit more threes, then he's really playable. And then Jarris Walker changes the team too because of his defensive abilities, his rebounding abilities. There are a couple offensive rebounds that he actually grabbed that he let go or kind of lost control of, but I thought played pretty decently. So again, all you're worried about with a young player like that is making mistakes, and he has not made that many mistakes, which you love to see because he's only going to grow from there, and his confidence is only going to grow from there. So I think that's what the Pacers need to do to win game 2. Game 2 predictions. The Cavs win, ? Right? Right? With all of this news coming out this afternoon, I don't want to do it because I feel like the Cavs have to win, right? Like they can't possibly drop game 2. I'm going to go ahead and say Cavs win because I just don't know if the Pacers can go 2 straight in Cleveland. That being said, I give it a 51% chance that the Cavs win and a 49% chance that the Pacers win this one now. Because I do think that some of those players, even if they do play, are affected by their injuries. So, and if Darius Garland comes back, that adds a new layer. But I still lean Cavs, right? Because I mean, they have to. They have to. They cannot lose game 2. They cannot. Because if they do, I mean, they get to a very dangerous spot. Very, very dangerous. Because then they have to win 4 of 5. And I don't see that happening with the Pacers owning 4 games at Gamebridge. I just don't see them beating the Pacers twice at home. So, yeah, I'm going to go Cavs with this one. Right? Maybe. Cavs by 7. I don't know. I have no idea. I think the Pacers could win this game because of all these things that are happening. But next prediction, and this kind of goes against my theory of like when Ty has 20, the Pacers usually win. But Ty's going to have a 20-10 and then a 0-1 turnover game again. I think he's that special. I think he's gotten to that point where he's that confident. Number 3 prediction, I'm going to have Pascal Siakam has a massive game, 25 plus in points. And then if DeAndre Hunter plays and Ty Jerome plays, they're going to be the difference in this game. And now, I don't know, maybe DeAndre Hunter doesn't play. I would actually have more confidence in Mobley playing than Hunter. I just don't know. Like, well, I don't know. How serious is a dislocated finger? Can you play with a dislocated finger more so than a sprained ankle? That'd be an interesting question. But number 4, basically the Cavs bench having a better performance than they had in game 1, aside from Ty Jerome, who didn't really shoot the ball that well. They weren't really much of a factor. And then number 5, you know what? With number 5, I'm going to give a caveat prediction. I would say if number 5, if the Cavs don't have Garland and don't have a combination of Mobley or Hunter, or if they're just missing one of those 3, I'm going to say, you know what? I'm going to say if they're missing one of those 3, I think the Pacers win this game. Is that crazy? Is that stupid? I don't know. Like, I just feel like the Pacers played so well. I don't really know what the Cavs do to try to mitigate some of the issues they had. I just think the Pacers are that much better. Maybe this is too much confidence, and people are like, whoa, man, they're the Cavs still. Like, calm down. But with all these nagging injuries and Garland not being 100%, I could see Donovan having a crazy game. Maybe that's the better prediction. Maybe that's my 5th prediction instead of that one I just said. Because then it gives the Cavs that advantage, right? I'm going to go with Donovan Mitchell over 40. Because he might need 40 if some of these guys don't play. I don't know. It's a bummer. I wish they were all healthy because it's more fun for everybody. But yeah. So basically a recap or a redo here, not a redo, a recap review of this one. Final closing thoughts. The Cavs are on the brink here. If the Pacers win game 2, the Cavs are in some serious trouble. And I'm talking like, if the Pacers win tomorrow, I think the Pacers definitely win the series. I don't think the Cavs stand a chance if the Pacers win again tomorrow. If the Pacers lose, I still feel pretty good about the Pacers in 6. If I'm Kenny Atkinson, I do consider changing the lineup a little bit in the way that I don't know if I can really trust Mobley and Allen out there together. That's a lot of liability. I think they're more effective when they can trot out a lineup that's a little bit smaller. Because if you look at their plus minuses in the team and like the lineups that were a little bit more effective, they were smaller lineups. So like the number 1 plus minus that played at least significant minutes, 7, 8 minutes together, this lineup here. Donovan Mitchell, Hunter, Jerome, Wade, and Mobley. Like that was a pretty effective lineup against this Pacer team as far as, at least holding their own, but they were still -2. I mean, their best lineups, they didn't really play that much. I guess this one, Jared Allen, Strus, Hunter, Jerome, and Merrill. Again, small lineup. And that one worked. +4, 3 minutes. In 3 minutes, scored 10, 66% from the field, 66% from three. So, yeah, maybe that's the lineup they have to go with. More of like Jared Allen and Mobley, or / Mobley, with Strus, Hunter, Jerome, Merrill, or Garland. Like, those are going to be more effective than I think the two bigs playing together. Because I think the Pacers just have too much of an advantage then. Because if you look at the Pacers lineups, obviously their starting lineup was their best, but the next best plus minus was Turner, Nembhard, Toppin, Halliburton, Nesmith. And that's a good lineup. But that's not really a lineup they play too much in the season. Like, Toppin's usually not out there with Miles, but they played 4 minutes together yesterday, and they had 14 points. That was a good lineup yesterday. And then this one was pretty good too. TJ McConnell, Pascal, with Andrew Nembhard, Toppin, and Mathurin. Usually it's McConnell, Shepard / Walker, Siakam, Toppin, and Ben. They usually don't have two starters out there, but it's because the Pacers are matching Mitchell's minutes with Cruz minutes, which is obvious, and Rick's very good about that. So let me know what your thoughts are. Pacers going into game 2, and now you've heard about the possibility that Darius Garland, Evan Mobley, and DeAndre Hunter are very questionable for this next game. Hunter with the dislocated finger, Mobley with a ankle issue, and Darius Garland with that toe issue. Not looking good for the Cavs. Pacers must try their best to take this game, because they could absolutely send a huge punch in the way of the Cavs, and there would be major pressure on this team in game 3. Yeah, let me know your thoughts. Who wins this game? What do we see in this game? Who are the key factors? Who are the X factors? Who do you see having a breakout performance for the Pacers or the Cavs, I guess, if you're listening, if you're a Cavs fan? Let me know in the comments below. We are on YouTube. If you're looking for the video version of this podcast, you can find us at the Pacers Fever Show. We are on socials at the Pacers Fever Show on Instagram, X, Facebook, and soon to be TikTok. We are also found on any of the podcast platforms. Anywhere you listen to your podcast, you can find us at the Pacers Fever Show. We will be covering the Indiana Fever coming up very soon. Their season starts right around the corner. So we will be doing a season preview of the Indiana Fever. I just watched their game against Brazil. Caitlin Clark back at Carver Hawkeye had an unbelievable game. Was very good in that game. And tell you what, the Fever looked good too. It's an exciting time for Indiana basketball. So looking forward to covering them as well, and looking forward to covering the Pacers postseason run. Hopefully we get game 2. It's going to be a very difficult. You'll see the best punch, I think, that the Cavs will have all series in this next game, because they cannot afford to go down 2-0, because that is almost a death sentence in the NBA, is to lose your first 2 at home. So looking forward to watching that game tomorrow. Again, it is on TNT at 7 p.m. Eastern time, and that is Tuesday, May 6th. We're dropping this episode on Monday night, so if you're listening on Monday night, that game will be tomorrow. If you're listening on Tuesday morning or Tuesday afternoon, Pacers play tonight. So let's get a win. Let's make this a very, very difficult series for the Cavs to even have life in. I think you could really do some damage if you can keep this game close tomorrow and win it. So that being said, thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. We really appreciate it. And let me know if you are rooting for those Pacers to get a game 2 win over these Cleveland Cavaliers.